My name is Morgan Lane. I'm 34 years old. I used to believe family meant protection, that no matter what mistakes you made, there would always be a place to land. That illusion shattered the night I told my father the truth, and he looked at me like I was something to be ashamed of. I remember the moment like a photograph burned into my memory. The smell of lemon oil from the freshly mopped floor, the hum of the dishwasher in the background, and his voice, sharp, thunderous, final. He had just gotten home from work, his tie still crooked, the scowl already forming when he saw me standing in the kitchen with a small envelope in my hands. My hands were shaking, but my voice wasn't. "I found something," I said. "Something you need to know about me." He took the envelope, opened it, and within seconds his face contorted with rage. "Are you telling me this is real?" he asked, voice rising. I nodded. The DNA test was irrefutable. I was adopted, and they had never told me. Not once. The betrayal wasn't just that I didn't know where I came from. It was that my entire childhood, my sense of identity, had been built on a lie no one planned to correct. He didn't defend it. He didn't comfort me. He just exploded. "We gave you everything, and this is how you repay us? Snooping around, digging into things that don't concern you." His hand slammed the counter. My mother stood frozen behind him, eyes wide with guilt. But she didn't speak. Not then. Not ever. I didn't yell back. I didn't cry. I just stood still and said, "I deserve to know who I am." That was the final crack. He grabbed my suitcase, the one I'd packed 2 days earlier in case things went badly, and threw it out the front door. "Then go find out," he roared. "Go chase your bloodline, but don't come back here with it." My mother turned away as I stepped outside. She couldn't even look me in the eyes. The door slammed shut behind me, but it didn't feel like the end. It felt like the beginning. I was 19, confused, furious, but not defeated. There was a fire under all that heartbreak. I didn't have much, just a suitcase, a folder of old medical records I'd dug up, and the number of a woman in Oregon who might be my birth mother. But I also had something my parents didn't expect. Resolve, and I walked away without begging, without looking back, because deep down I knew something they never taught me. Silence, when held long enough, becomes power. 15 years later, when I opened my front door and saw their faces again, older, more fragile, trying not to show the years that had worn them down, I didn't speak at first. I just stepped aside and let them in, because I wanted them to see what happened when the child they threw out decided to become something they'd never expected. There's something strange about betrayal when it comes from the people who raised you. It doesn't feel like fire, it feels like frostbite, slow, numbing, invisible at first, until one day you realize parts of you no longer feel anything. After my father kicked me out, I stayed at a hostel off Melrose for 4 nights. No one called. No one texted. My mother didn't even send a message to check if I was safe. That silence, that unbearable quiet, told me more about my place in their world than any screaming match ever could. The woman from Oregon, the one I believed could be my birth mother, responded to my email on the 5th day. Her name was Evelyn. Her reply was short, but careful. "Let's talk. I think we need to." I scraped together the money for a bus ticket and rode 16 hours north with my suitcase under my legs and my heart in my throat. I didn't know what I expected. Some soft reunion, a hug, a feeling of being found. What I got instead was something rarer, truth without sugar. Evelyn met me outside her bookstore in Portland. She was calm, tall, with streaks of silver in her braid, and eyes that looked like mine. She didn't cry. She didn't fall apart. She simply handed me a cup of coffee and said, "I never stopped wondering if you'd find me." We sat for 3 hours on a bench in the back of the store while she told me everything, how she was 20, terrified, forced into silence by her family, and how my father, the man I'd grown up calling Dad, had convinced the adoption agency she was unfit. He paid for silence, and she gave it until now. I didn't react with rage. I listened. Every piece of truth that used to hurt became a kind of medicine. It burned going down, but it healed. I stayed in Portland for a month, working part-time at Evelyn's shop, trying to understand who I was without the identity I'd worn like a hand-me-down. I read old journals, learned about my grandparents, and pieced together the story of a girl who was wanted, just hidden. Evelyn never pressured me. She just made space, and somehow that space made room for me to begin again. When I returned to LA, I didn't go back to that hostel. I didn't ask my parents for help. I sublet a tiny back room in someone's house, got a job at a legal filing service downtown, and enrolled in night classes. Every dollar I earned went to books, rent, and coffee. There were nights I fell asleep with my head on my textbooks and woke up with pen marks on my cheek. I wasn't chasing revenge. I was chasing clarity. I didn't want to hurt them. I wanted to outgrow them. And slowly I did. Not through grand gestures, but through 1,000 quiet acts of self-respect. Every invoice I processed, every grade I earned, every time I ignored the urge to prove something to people who stopped seeing me. I built strength in silence, and the woman I became over those years, she didn't need their approval. She wasn't looking back, but she remembered everything, and she was preparing for a day they never saw coming. It started with spreadsheets, just harmless, quiet spreadsheets. While other students barely skimmed their coursework, I devoured every lesson on business operations, contract law, and financial systems, like my life depended on it. Because it did. By 24, I was managing back-end operations for a small but rapidly growing logistics firm in Pasadena. I kept my head down, said little in meetings, but listened to everything. People underestimated the quiet ones. They always do. And that was my greatest asset. The company's founder, Elena Ruiz, was a blunt, no-nonsense woman who reminded me of Evelyn, composed, sharp, and allergic to small talk. She saw potential in me I hadn't yet owned. One night, after we closed a complex deal that saved the company nearly $200,000, she called me into her office. "You've got teeth," she said. "Silent teeth. I like that. You ever thought about building something of your own?" I hadn't. Not seriously. But when someone like her says something like that, you don't forget it. So, I started planning, quietly. No social media posts, no startup buzz, just late nights sketching out systems and strategies in a spiral notebook while the city slept outside my window. By the time I was 29, I had co-founded a data integrity firm that specialized in corporate cleanup. We fixed the messes other executives left behind, and did it so discreetly no one even noticed we'd been there. Our reputation grew through whispers and referrals. Clients paid well for invisibility and results. I never used my last name professionally, just Morgan. No paper trail connecting me to the girl who was cast out for searching too deeply. But one day the past caught up, not in the way I feared, but in a way I could finally control. I was reviewing onboarding documents for a new client, a mid-sized manufacturing company in Orange County, when I saw the name Richard Lane, VP of Compliance. My father. He had taken early retirement from his old job and joined this company 5 years ago. They were in chaos, hemorrhaging money, and now they needed us. I didn't flinch. I assigned the project to myself. The company had no idea who I was, and neither did he, at least not yet. My team and I spent weeks combing through mismanaged accounts, broken reporting chains, and compliance violations. It wasn't personal, it was professional. But when the final report crossed my desk, I saw something interesting, a subtle pattern in Richard Lane's audits. Missed disclosures, overlooked conflicts of interest, nothing criminal, but enough to damage credibility if surfaced. He had been coasting on his name and charm. I had built something from nothing. Now, for the first time, our paths had crossed on even ground, and I was the one holding the file. I didn't make a scene. I didn't call or threaten or shame him. I just made sure the internal report was flagged for executive review, with my signature at the bottom. Not my full name, just Morgan, founder, Kestrel, Integrity Group. I didn't need revenge. I just needed him to realize that the daughter he threw away was now sitting on the other side of his fate, with the power to ruin him or let him see what restraint actually looks like. It was a Tuesday afternoon when the email hit his inbox. Not a dramatic message, just a formal executive summary, findings, recommended adjustments, and a note from me at the bottom, thanking him for his cooperation. I watched the read receipt blink green. 3 minutes later, his access badge was used at the building entrance. He was coming in. That's when I stood up, closed my laptop, and walked to the conference room window that overlooked the lobby. I didn't need to hide. I wanted him to see me, not the version he remembered, but the woman who rewrote her story without him.
He stepped off the elevator with that same stiff walk I remembered from childhood, upright, rehearsed, authoritative. But when he glanced into the glass-walled conference room and saw me standing there, something flickered across his face. Recognition, confusion, then realization. He stopped mid-stride, like his body forgot how to move. I didn't nod, I didn't wave. I just met his gaze and held it, steady and silent. He turned away quickly, retreating toward the compliance office, but I knew it was already too late. The seed had been planted and panic was taking root.
The next day, I got a call from HR requesting clarification on some unusual observations flagged in our report. They didn't know the history, they just saw the data. I kept it factual. No embellishment, no personal notes. I was professional to a fault, and that professionalism made every line of the report hit harder. A week later, the board put Richard Lane on administrative leave pending further review. I didn't celebrate. I didn't gloat. I went back to work, just like I had every other day, calm, methodical, untouchable. Word travels quietly in our industry. People began asking about the woman who brought down a senior executive without ever raising her voice. I didn't say much. I never do. But behind closed doors, I could feel the shift. For years, I had built my reputation brick by brick, case by case, always under the radar. Now I wasn't just respected. I was feared, not because I tore people down, but because I could, and chose not to, unless necessary. 2 months later, my company was retained for a large-scale restructure for a national finance firm. It came with visibility, press, and invitations to speak on panels. I kept my last name off the brochures, not out of shame, but because legacy meant something different to me now. I wasn't carrying the weight of their name. I had forged my own. And when I walked onto that stage in San Francisco with a mic clipped to my collar and my story buried deep beneath the surface, I felt something I hadn't in years. Not victory, but peace. Richard never reached out. Not then. But I heard from someone in legal that he resigned quietly, citing health reasons. They let him leave with a pension and no formal stain. That was fine with me. I didn't want his destruction. I just wanted him to know that the daughter he discarded had become the gatekeeper of the very system he once believed he controlled. It was a Saturday morning when the knock came. Soft, hesitant, like the sound of someone unsure if they should be there at all. I was standing in my kitchen, barefoot, stirring coffee in a handmade ceramic mug. Evelyn had gifted me years ago. My home was quiet, warm light pouring through tall windows, fresh flowers on the dining table and jazz humming low in the background. I wasn't expecting anyone, but the moment I looked through the peephole, I knew it was him. Richard Lane stood on my porch, smaller somehow than I remembered. His blazer was pressed, but his shoulders slouched in a way that no tailor could fix. He looked around the porch like he wasn't sure whether to knock again or walk away. I opened the door slowly. No hello, no smile, just the stillness between us that said everything we hadn't said in 15 years. His eyes met mine, and for the first time I saw not anger, not pride, but something unfamiliar on his face. Shame. I wasn't sure if you'd open the door, he said. His voice was rough, not from age, but from years of silence weighing down every word. I didn't answer. I stepped back without speaking and let him enter. He walked slowly, taking in the space. Hardwood floors, bookshelves lined with contracts, leadership titles, and psychology manuals. Framed photographs of my team. A soft photo of Evelyn and me from the Portland store. No clutter, no chaos. Just a life built on precision and intention. The opposite of the night I walked out of his house.
He sat on the edge of the couch, carefully, like he wasn't sure he was allowed to be comfortable here. I remained standing. I didn't know. He finally said, "About the company. About the report. Not until, well, until it was too late." I nodded, not because I forgave him, but because I had already made peace with the timeline. He fumbled for more words. "I never imagined you'd become this." That part almost stung. Almost! But I didn't let it.
"You didn't have to imagine," I replied. "You could have stayed and seen it for yourself." He flinched. Not visibly, but I could tell the words struck deeper than he expected. He looked around the room again, desperate to find something to soften the moment. "You were always stubborn," he said with a strange chuckle, "always trying to figure things out your way." I didn't smile. "No," I said plainly. "I was always trying to understand why you were afraid of the truth." He sat back deflated. The kind of silence that follows isn't loud, it's thick. He wasn't here to apologize. He didn't know how. He wasn't here to fix the past. He couldn't. He was just here to witness what he tried to erase, and that was enough. I let him sit with it, let him look at everything he didn't help build. And then I asked him the only question I'd ever wanted him to answer. "What did you think would happen to me when you shut that door?" He didn't respond. He just lowered his head, and that was the first honest moment I'd ever seen from my father. I watched him as he sat there, staring down at his hands like they held pieces of a life he couldn't rebuild. There was no rage in me, no need to yell, accuse, or demand apologies that would only land hollow. That version of me, the girl he cast out, had grown beyond the need to be seen by someone so blind. He didn't know what to say, and maybe that was the most honest thing about him. When stripped of power, he had no language left. I poured him a glass of water and set it down on the coffee table without a word. The gesture wasn't kindness. It was dignity for me. I had become someone who could offer that without losing anything. "You know," I said. My voice low, it wasn't the secret that broke me. It was the silence. "The way you chose to punish my questions instead of standing beside them." He didn't look up. "I know," he said quietly, "and I've lived with that." I nodded slowly. "Good," I replied, "because I'm not here to carry it for you." I wasn't bitter, just clear. That's what healing looks like when it's real, not theatrical, not loud, just a firm boundary held with grace. He finally looked at me then, really looked, and I saw a man who'd lost his place in a story he thought he authored. He saw now that I had written an entirely different ending, one that didn't need his approval, one that thrived without it. As he stood to leave, his hand hovered by the door. "If there's ever a chance," he said, "to know who you are now, to meet the people in your life." I stopped him with a glance. "That door opens slowly," I said, "and only for those who know how to knock with humility." He swallowed hard, gave a stiff nod, and stepped out onto the porch. The light hit his face as he turned around one last time, but I was already closing the door. Only this time it didn't slam. It clicked softly into place, the sound of a chapter ending, not with fury, but with full control. He leaned against the door and breathed, not from exhaustion, but release. I had nothing left to prove. I had become the woman no one expected, not in spite of the silence, but because of it. I had loved myself through erasure, rebuilt my identity from ashes, and now stood unshaken in a house they once believed I'd never deserve. And somewhere inside that house, a fresh pot of coffee brewed, a new project waited on my desk, and a future I built with my own hands continued to unfold, alone, maybe, but not empty, not forgotten, not erased. If you've ever walked through fire and refused to come out burned, share your strengths below. And remember, silence isn't weakness. It's the sound of a woman writing her own ending.